April 1922. A determined Pearl Young steps onto the grounds of the Langley Memorial Aeronautical Laboratory.
Throughout her career, Ms. Young was a scientist, an educator, a technical editor, and a researcher.
The National Aeronautics and Space Administration has played an important role in establishing this country's leadership in world aeronautics.
Prepared and determined, Pearl braced herself for the relentless wall of sexism that would attempt to stymie her career.
Women were rarely encouraged to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM fields.
While her friends played with dolls, Pearl Young was busy smashing them and the stereotypes that fought to keep her grounded. Not all heroes grace the covers of magazines. Some don't even crave the recognition. Instead, some heroes quietly reshape the world through determination, intellect, and an unwavering spirit. Pearl's journey began far from the halls of aerospace innovation, where a young girl dared to dream.
Ms. Young had always been a bit of a trailblazer, even given the many barriers women faced at the time. Women weren't even allowed to go to college in some cases, and if they were admitted, they were told to stick to the appropriate fields for women, which were definitely not math and science. Men were careful to recode what was considered a prestigious STEM field by introducing terminology such as soft science to distance men from women's work in positions such as technical writers or the NACA's early computers, which were women.
The NACA employed skilled mathematicians, hundreds of women known as human computers, to perform complex calculations by hand. Despite their intellect and contributions, or perhaps because of them, these women faced intense discrimination, sometimes relegated to segregated facilities and denied recognition for their work.
Which brings us back to Pearl, whose story begins in Teope, Minnesota in 1895. Ms. Young was born October 12th, growing up as the second oldest of 11 children in her family. Describing her younger years, Pearl said, "Girls are ruined by dolls. If they would go in for more practical playthings, there would be more women scientists. When I was a girl, I was annoyed when anyone gave me a doll. I smashed them, every one of them." Pearl graduated from the University of North Dakota as a triple major in physics, mathematics, and chemistry with honors. She then served as faculty in the physics department at UND and taught in Alvarado, Minnesota before starting her decades-long career with the NACA. And it wasn't until 13 years later, in 1935, when the NACA hired the first women computers. As a laboratory assistant and later a junior physicist, Pearl says of these roles, "We made, designed, we repaired, calibrated, everything to do with the airplane and instruments." To communicate these new technologies and ongoing scientific development, the NACA distributed what were known as technical reports.
The NACA's technical reports proved to be the unsung heroes of early aviation, sharing crucial scientific findings with researchers across the country. But the reports were hampered by dense technical writing, confusing to some engineers, challenging to others, and impenetrable to outsiders. These would soon become Pearl's personal crusade.
Ms. Young noted that the clarity and accuracy of these reports could be improved by creating positions for technical editors within the agency. She said the engineers lacked the time to make readable reports. And so began her transition to technical editing, where Pearl led her own office of technical editors, women who held backgrounds in multiple STEM fields in addition to technical writing.
We're mathematicians, physicists, and scientists, Pearl would say. We almost have to be.
But this new position was not without its own barriers as well. Throughout her time at Elmal, Pearl encountered biased supervisors who claimed she had an attitude problem, but reading between the lines on her performance evaluation simply states that she was efficient and completing steady work. and Pearl had several colleagues and friends who knew her work was stellar. So stellar, in fact, that she was asked to lead a professional development presentation series for women at Langley from 1935 to 1936 in various fields of aeronautics, including flight, propulsion, engines and cylinders, structures, fuel, and wind tunnels. Ms. Young led this series in partnership with the engineer in charge, Mr. Henry J.E. Reed, and they were awarded the Two-Horse Team Medal for their teamwork and leadership.
All American News brings you our people's contribution to America and freedom. The weaker sex isn't weak anymore. Women are equally expert at punch or drill machines. She's trimming cartridges, getting them all ready for the Nazis and the Jets. Girls are particularly adept at this delicate precision work.
As the country braced for a Second World War, the NACA accelerated its efforts, pioneering crucial advances in aircraft design. With new research labs and breakthroughs in aerodynamics, the NACA's innovations shaped iconic aircraft like the P-51 Mustang and the very nature of war itself.
Ms. Young's many talents made her a versatile employee at the NACA, and in the early 1940s, the needs of World War II had significant impacts on the charge of the NACA. It was necessary to transfer experienced employees like Ms. Young to their new locations in California and Ohio, today known as NASA Ames and NASA Glenn, to ensure that they were well prepared to make efficient contributions to wartime efforts. After 20 years in Hampton, Virginia, Pearl transferred to the newly established NACA Field Center in Cleveland, Ohio, the Aircraft Engine Research Laboratory, in January 1943. She started out as an associate technical editor of the AERL, leading the technical editing section there. It was in this position that Ms. Young made one of her most notable contributions to the agency, publishing the Style Manual for Engineering Authors in 1943, her very first year at the AERL. This style manual was instrumental during World War II in allowing for technical reports to include accurate and timely information for wartime efforts. Because of the style guide's monumental impacts, Ms. Young has even been referred to as the architect of the NACA technical report system.
I'm no genius, Pearl would later tell a reporter, but when folks find out I'm able to talk about science, they think I must be brainy.
In her letters, Ms. Young often wrote of being overworked and underpaid. And with women expected to be the primary caregiver in the family, these expectations had compounding impacts on an all-female office at the NACA. In 1947, Ms. Young felt there was a great need for qualified teachers in higher education, so she wanted to teach physics to soldiers in Japan. But blatant sexism prevented her from following this path. General Douglas MacArthur said, "There will be no women physics teachers in Japan as long as I'm in command." Ms. Young instead taught engineering physics as a faculty member at Pennsylvania State College at Pottsville for the next 10 years. And this general was not alone in his sexist opinions of the time. In 1956, the National Science Foundation published a report titled "Women Are Not for Engineering." And at the time of the publication, Ms. Young had already been teaching engineering physics for about a decade. But with the changing student population, Ms. Young returned to the research world. First, she completed both scientific and historical research at the NACA and NASA back in Cleveland, under the new title Technical Literature Analyst. Pearl then resigned from NASA in 1960, taught engineering physics again, this time at Fresno State College in California for 1 year, and then returned to her historical research, compiling a book titled Who Was Who in Aeronautics Before 1910. However, Ms. Young grew ill with cancer, which made it difficult to continue her research. Betty Toll, a former editor at NASA Langley, assisted Pearl with indexing her many years of research in this final work. While Pearl was ill with cancer in her final years, she remained steadfast to her passions. She even wrote a farewell letter addressed to her friends and relatives 2 years before she passed, advising that they do not give way to emotional hysteria, weeping, or regret, but instead interpret the letter in peace and hope.
In October 1958, the NACA would be dissolved, giving way to NASA as the space race began in earnest.
The space effort is extremely interesting, and it is an area in which there will be considerable growth for the future. I think the young men in this country who have been properly trained in the sciences and technology are, in many cases, eager to get into the program.
Pearl's groundbreaking work earned her numerous accolades, including the prestigious UND Sue Award and induction into the NASA and NACA Langley Hall of Honor. Today, her legacy lives on through the Pearl I. Young Theater at the NASA Langley Research Center and a North Dakota Space Grant Consortium scholarship that bears her name, inspiring future generations to reach for the stars.
What truly makes Ms. Young's story so inspiring is not necessarily her technical achievements. It was her character that played a pivotal role in lasting positive impacts on the lives of others. Despite the countless barriers that women faced in STEM and at the NACA and NASA, Ms. Young persisted, and she did so through acts of advocacy, establishing a network of connectedness, and in remaining true to her authentic self. Ms. Young's fierce advocacy for herself and others sometimes required that she challenged authority or resisted change. She stood up for her editing section when male supervisors wrongfully accused them of making mistakes. She wrote official proposals to properly classify her office in the research division at the AERL, or writing official memorandums to ensure that deserving colleagues earned rightful promotions at the NACA. She regularly acknowledged the contributions of her entire team for shared achievements, including the infamous style manual. And Ms. Young often referred to these actions as raising hell. Given her advocacy, it's no surprise that Ms. Young lived a life full of connections with her colleagues and friends, seemingly never missing an opportunity to lift others up. Ms. Young's achievements and actions at the NACA, NASA, and in higher education paved the way for generations of women in STEM to dismantle barriers and continue to persist.
Pearl Young was a trailblazer whose unwavering spirit broke through the barriers of her time. From her humble beginnings in Minnesota to her pioneering roles at the NACA and NASA, Pearl's journey is a testament to resilience and courage. Her legacy inspires women everywhere to chase their dreams in science and technology, proving that the pursuit of knowledge knows no bounds. In her footsteps, we find the courage to change the world.